Marcus didn't yell. He didn't pace. He didn't even look nervous. He stood in the center of our new living room with his hands in his pockets, staring at the wall where we planned to hang our wedding portrait, and said it as calmly as someone announcing a change in dinner plans. "My mistress is coming to our housewarming. Be mature about it, or we're done." His voice was even, measured, almost bored, like he had already rehearsed the line and stripped it of any emotion that might inconvenience him. For a moment, I honestly thought I had misheard him. The refrigerator hummed softly behind me. The air conditioner clicked on, and outside, a lawnmower buzzed in the distance. Life continuing uninterrupted while my chest tightened so hard, it felt like my ribs might crack. I remember the exact way the sunlight came through the tall windows, cutting across the hardwood floor in clean golden lines. I remember noticing dust floating in the air and thinking how strange it was that something so small could still exist when my entire world had just tilted off its axis. This house was supposed to be our reward, proof that love, patience, and sacrifice paid off. Instead, it felt like a courtroom where I'd just been handed a verdict without a trial. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. My body felt frozen, like my spirit had stepped out of me for protection. And in that silence, I understood something terrifying. Marcus wasn't asking for forgiveness. He wasn't confessing. He was informing me of a decision he had already made. This house didn't fall into our laps. It was built on exhaustion, skipped meals, and prayers whispered through clenched teeth. I worked overtime for nearly 2 years straight, sometimes 6 days a week, coming home with aching feet and swollen ankles, collapsing onto the couch while Marcus rubbed my shoulders and promised it would all be worth it. I passed on vacations, on shopping sprees, on small joys, telling myself that delayed gratification was the price of stability. When the down payment finally cleared, I cried in the car alone, hands shaking on the steering wheel, because it felt like proof that I had done something right with my life. I chose this neighborhood deliberately. Tree-lined streets, black families who waved when you drove by, old men who sat on porches and nodded like silent guardians. It reminded me of my grandmother's block, where people corrected you when you were wrong and fed you when you were hungry. I imagined hosting Sunday dinners, children running through the backyard, laughter echoing off these walls. I imagined growing old here, now standing in the same space where I once pictured my future. I realized how cruel it was that betrayal could wear the face of success. The very walls meant to shelter me were about to witness my humiliation. When my voice finally returned, it sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "Why?" I asked. Not angrily, not accusingly. Just one small word heavy with everything I couldn't yet articulate. Marcus sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead as if I were the problem, as if my confusion was exhausting him. He said he was tired of hiding, said he wanted to live authentically, said he believed in transparency now. And then he said her name, Lila, softly, almost respectfully, the way a man speaks about something he values. He told me she deserved acknowledgement, not secrecy, that she had been patient, that she understood him in ways I didn't anymore. Each sentence landed like a quiet slap, not loud enough to draw attention, but painful enough to leave a mark. When he used the word mature, I finally understood what he meant. To Marcus, maturity meant swallowing pain without choking. It meant prioritizing his comfort over my dignity. It meant accepting disrespect gracefully so he wouldn't have to feel guilty. And in that moment, standing in the house I helped build, I realized he had already chosen himself. Long before he ever chose honesty, I waited until Marcus fell asleep before reaching for my phone. The house was quiet in a way that felt unnatural, like it was holding its breath. The soft glow from the kitchen light spilled into the hallway, and I sat at the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, rehearsing what I would say, even though I knew no rehearsal could prepare me for admitting this out loud. Calling my mother felt like failure, not because she would judge me, but because she had warned me years ago not to mistake potential for commitment. When she answered, her voice warm and familiar, something in my chest finally broke open. At first, I couldn't form sentences, just fragments and shaky breaths. She didn't rush me. She never did. When I finally told her what Marcus said, every word tasted bitter, like I was poisoning myself by repeating them. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and then she sighed, not in surprise, but in recognition. "Baby," she said softly, "a man who asks you to tolerate disrespect in your own home is measuring how much of yourself you're willing to lose." Her words didn't comfort me. They clarified something I had been avoiding. Love should never require erasure. Once Marcus said her name out loud, Lila stopped being an idea and became a shadow that followed me everywhere. I noticed her absence in every room, which was somehow worse than her presence. I imagined her laugh, the way she might tilt her head when listening, the confidence Marcus admired. He spoke about her like she was refreshing, like she represented something light and easy that he believed I had become too tired to be. I wondered if she knew how often I'd stayed up late ironing his shirts, or how many times I defended him when people questioned his ambition. What haunted me most wasn't jealousy. It was the possibility that she knew exactly who I was and came anyway. That she could walk into my home, into my life, and accept the role Marcus assigned her without questioning the cost. I tried to imagine her as a villain, but reality was more complicated. The real betrayal didn't belong to her. It belonged to the man who thought he could orchestrate pain like a dinner party and expect gratitude for his honesty. The guest list sat on the kitchen counter, a neat stack of envelopes that suddenly felt like evidence. My aunties, his cousins, church friends who prayed over us when we bought the house. People who believed in our marriage because we told them to. Each name carried history, laughter, shared meals, inside jokes. I imagined their faces when Lila arrived. Confusion first, then understanding, then the slow spread of judgment they'd try to hide behind politeness. The thought made my stomach twist. What terrified me most wasn't confrontation. It was pity, the sympathetic head tilts, the quiet whispers, the way Black women are expected to absorb pain with grace so no one feels uncomfortable. I realized then that Marcus wasn't just asking me to be mature, he was asking me to perform dignity while being disrespected publicly. And as I stood there, holding those invitations, I felt the first spark of something unfamiliar rising in me. Not anger, not fear, but resolve. That night I stood alone in the bathroom long after Marcus went to bed. The mirror was unforgiving under the bright light, revealing exhaustion I had been pretending not to see. My eyes looked older somehow, heavier, like they had been carrying truths my mouth refused to speak. I leaned forward, gripping the edge of the sink, studying my face the way you do when you're trying to remember who you used to be. I thought about the girl I was when Marcus first met me, laughing easily, believing deeply, loving without keeping score. Somewhere along the way, I had learned to make myself smaller to keep peace, quieter to avoid conflict, flexible enough to bend without breaking, or so I thought. As I stared at my reflection, something unexpected happened. I didn't see weakness. I saw endurance. I saw generations of women behind my eyes, grandmothers who survived worse with fewer options, mothers who carried families on their backs while pretending it didn't hurt. I pressed my palm against my chest and felt my heartbeat, steady and alive, refusing to surrender. For the first time since Marcus spoke those words, I understood something clearly. Whatever happened next would define who I became from this moment forward. And I was no longer willing to disappear for anyone's comfort, not even the man I married. The next morning, Marcus moved through the house like nothing had changed. He made coffee, scrolled through his phone, talked about caterers and playlists as if betrayal were just another item on the to-do list. His calm irritated me more than anger ever could. When I finally confronted him again, asking how he could expect me to accept this, he looked genuinely confused, as if my pain were irrational. He said relationships evolve, said monogamy was an outdated expectation, said he didn't want to lie anymore, and that should count for something. Listening to him, I realized how carefully he had rewritten reality to suit himself. In his story, he wasn't cruel. He was brave. He wasn't selfish. He was honest. And I wasn't betrayed. I was resistant to growth. He framed my hurt as immaturity, my boundaries as insecurity. The audacity of it all left me stunned. This wasn't love speaking. This was entitlement dressed up as emotional intelligence. and I finally saw how dangerous that disguise could be. I went to church alone that Sunday. Sitting in the familiar pew felt strange without Marcus beside me, his arm usually resting across the back, claiming me in ways that now felt hollow. The choir sang about endurance, about holding on through the storm, and the words settled uneasily in my chest. I wondered how many women before me had sat in these same pews, nodding along while carrying pain they were told to endure in the name of love, marriage, or faith. How many had mistaken suffering for sacrifice? When the pastor spoke about wisdom, something shifted inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet certainty rising beneath the noise of obligation and expectation. God does not require humiliation. Love does not demand self-destruction. And silence is not maturity. It is surrender. I bowed my head, not to ask for my marriage to be saved, but to ask for clarity. And clarity came, steady and undeniable. Whatever choice I made next had to honor my dignity, even if it broke my heart. As the housewarming drew closer, the days began to feel like a slow march towards something inevitable and cruel. Marcus grew increasingly energized, as if preparing for a performance he was certain he would win applause for. He talked endlessly about logistics, parking arrangements, drink selections, background music, his voice animated, his posture relaxed. Meanwhile, I moved through the house like a ghost, cleaning and organizing out of habit rather than intention. Every surface I wiped felt like an act of betrayal against myself, as though I were helping prepare my own public shaming. At night, sleep refused to come easily. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying Marcus's words, imagining scenarios I couldn't escape. Sometimes my mind drifted to fantasies of confrontation, sharp words, dramatic exits. But reality felt heavier, more complex. I was a Black woman raised to value composure, to keep family matters private, to handle things with grace. But grace, I was learning, had been weaponized against me. This wasn't about being strong anymore. It was about deciding whether strength meant enduring the unbearable or refusing it altogether. 2 days before the housewarming, Marcus came home with a new shirt folded neatly in a shopping bag. He held it up proudly, asking what I thought, turning slightly so he could admire himself in the mirror. I nodded absently, my stomach tightening as I realized he was preparing to impress her, not me. He talked about wanting everything to be positive vibes only, warning me not to make things uncomfortable. The irony nearly made me laugh. Later that evening, I stood alone in the kitchen, listening to him talk on the phone in the other room. His voice softer, lighter than it had been with me in months. I didn't need to hear her name to know who was on the other end. In that moment, something hardened inside me. Not bitterness, clarity. I understood that Marcus had already emotionally left this marriage. The only question remaining was whether I would stay and play the role he had assigned me, or whether I would finally reclaim the narrative of my own life. The day of the housewarming arrived wrapped in sunshine and false cheer. Guests began to trickle in, arms full of gifts, smiles wide with congratulations. Compliments echoed through the house about the floors, the space, the light, while my chest felt tight with unspoken truth. I moved politely among them, accepting hugs, pouring drinks, responding to praise with practiced ease. Every laugh felt borrowed, every smile strained. And then she arrived. Lila stepped through the door with confidence, her posture relaxed, her smile assured. She was beautiful in a way that suggested she knew it and had made peace with it long ago. Our eyes met for a brief, electric moment, long enough for understanding to pass between us. She knew. She had always known. Marcus introduced her without hesitation, his hand resting lightly at her back, as if daring the room to challenge him. And in that instant, standing in the home I helped build, surrounded by witnesses to my pain, I felt something settle deep within me. This was no longer about humiliation. This was about truth, and I was done hiding from it. For a few seconds after Lila's arrival, time seemed to slow. Conversations faltered, laughter softened, and the room filled with a strange, electric tension no one wanted to name. I could feel eyes moving between me, Marcus, and her, piecing together a story they hadn't been given permission to hear. My heart pounded so hard I was sure it showed on my face, but my body remained still, grounded in a calm I didn't know I possessed. Marcus continued playing host, pouring drinks, cracking jokes, basking in the attention like a man convinced he had already won. That was when I realized something crucial. He believed my silence meant consent. I stepped forward before fear could stop me. My voice, when I spoke, surprised even me. It was steady, clear, unshaking. I thanked everyone for coming, for celebrating what they believed was a happy milestone. Then I told the truth, not theatrically, not angrily, but honestly. I said this house was built with love and sacrifice, and that I had just learned my husband believed respect was optional if delivered politely. I didn't accuse, I explained. The room fell silent, not with shock, but with recognition. And for the first time since Marcus's declaration, I felt powerful. Not because I had control over him, but because I had reclaimed control over myself. Silence can be louder than shouting. It pressed against the walls, heavy and undeniable, forcing everyone to confront what had been laid bare. I noticed the way my auntie's lips tightened, the way Marcus's cousin looked down at his shoes, the way a close friend reached for my hand without saying a word. No one rushed to defend him. No one scolded me for airing dirty laundry. That, more than anything, told me how wrong Marcus had been about what maturity looked like. Marcus finally spoke, his voice sharp with anger masked as embarrassment. He accused me of humiliating him, of overreacting, of being dramatic. The irony was almost poetic. As he spoke, I saw something shift in the room. People who once admired him now seeing clearly who he was when challenged. Lila stood frozen, her confidence cracking for the first time, her role suddenly heavier than she expected. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply stood there, breathing, knowing I had done the one thing Marcus never anticipated. I told the truth out loud. When the last guest left and the house finally fell quiet, the air felt different, lighter, as if the walls themselves had exhaled. The gifts remained unopened, stacked neatly in the corner, like remnants of a life that no longer fit. Marcus paced the living room, furious, blaming me for everything that had gone wrong, his voice echoing off the walls we once dreamed in. I listened without interruption, not because I agreed, but because I no longer needed to defend myself. His words no longer held power over me. When he finally stopped, waiting for a reaction, I told him calmly that this housewarming wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of my freedom. I said I would not compete for respect in my own home, nor would I explain my worth to someone committed to misunderstanding it. That night, Marcus packed a bag. Watching him walk out didn't bring relief or triumph. It brought closure, the kind that hurts but heals. And as the door closed behind him, I stood alone in the silence, knowing that although my heart was bruised, my spirit was finally intact. The days after Marcus left were not dramatic. There were no grand speeches or instant relief. Healing arrived quietly, almost shyly, in small moments that didn't announce themselves. Some mornings I woke up reaching for him out of habit, only to remember he was gone, and that remembering still hurt. Other mornings I woke up surprised by the stillness, by the way peace had begun to settle into corners of the house I didn't know were tense. I cried in the shower, folded laundry with tears slipping down my face, and sat on the edge of the bed some nights just breathing through the ache. Healing, I learned, was not the absence of pain. It was the refusal to let pain dictate my future. I leaned into the people who showed up without conditions. My mother came by with food and quiet company. Friends called just to sit with me, not to fix anything. I started therapy, telling my story out loud to someone who didn't rush me past the uncomfortable parts. Slowly, I reclaimed the house, not by redecorating, but by re-inhabiting it with intention. I moved furniture. I played music Marcus never liked. I let laughter return naturally, not as performance, but as release. Each day, I felt myself becoming more present, more whole. Betrayal had cracked me open, but what grew in its place was self-trust. Months later, I hosted another gathering. Not a housewarming. This house no longer needed to prove itself, but a celebration of peace. The people who came were different this time, fewer, closer. There was food on the table that meant something, music that carried memory and joy, conversations that didn't tiptoe around truth. I moved through the rooms with ease, greeting laughter that felt earned. No one was watching me with pity. No one was whispering. I wasn't bracing myself for embarrassment. I was simply present, fully, honestly present. As the evening wound down, I stood alone in the doorway, watching the last rays of sunlight stretch across the floor. I thought about the woman I had been when Marcus first spoke those words, frozen, shocked, unsure if she was allowed to want more. And I smiled, not because the journey had been easy, but because it had been necessary. This house finally felt like home, not because of who lived in it with me, but because of who I had chosen to become inside it. I didn't lose my marriage that day. I found myself, and that I knew was a beginning no betrayal could ever take away.